Mr. October is the second episode of Alien Earth's first season, and if the first episode, Neverland, was the setup, then it's here where things can start really going wild with the alien carnage taking place on Earth. This episode definitely gets pretty wild. We have had the main characters already introduced, the initiating incident of the crash taking place, the general stakes laid out, and now we're moving forward to see how exactly those stakes can be raised. I think this episode is generally a good showcase of the characters, and how we're learning more of them, as well as more chaos raised by both the alien and the Maginot's other specimens. There are quite a few standout moments, and I'll be reviewing the episode today, again, starting with a warning, there will be spoilers. As the episode begins and the title Alien Earth reveals itself, we're given a view of quick flashes of the previous episodes along with some other alien imagery. This is the best you're going to get in terms of a recap, otherwise it gets right into it, continuing right from where we left off. Prodigy's search and rescue team, which includes Siberian, Rashidi, and Hermit, are all still exploring the wreckage of the Maginot. In typical alien fashion, there are long, dark corridors and ominous noises such as sparks and hisses that could be coming from the ship or from a hideous monster waiting in the shadows. As we saw at the end of the last episode, the Maginot is unstable at its crash site, having already shifted down from a floor inside the large building at the heart of Prodigy City. This is a 100-story tower, 80 floors above ground, 20 below. There is worry from the response team regarding gas lines, fires, and that the ship's fuel supply may be unstable. Time is of the essence. The trio enters the med lab, once again a dead ringer for the Nostromo's same location, and witness the aftermath of something pretty terrible. One dead body on the operating table, which I believe is the young apprentice we saw in episode 1, has his chest ripped open. Not necessarily in the same fashion as from the birth of a chest burster, but possibly an attempt to remove one. In the previous episode, we saw a very quick flash of what may have happened. Chibouzo, the scientist in charge of the Maginot specimens, is on the floor next to the table, looking exhausted and forlorn. It's likely, based on the evidence we see in the aftermath, this young man had been implanted via one of the escaped facehuggers, and there was a desperate attempt to remove the alien embryo inside of him. Whatever may have happened to the alien embryo is unclear for now, since we only have seen one grown adult xenomorph so far, but it would seem the apprentice died during the procedure. Chibouzo's death wasn't too far off from that. She's found in a ghastly death pose, pale with blood streaming down from her eyes, surgical gloves still on. Hermit takes a look at the body and determines the cause of death is suffocation. He points at her blue lips. He suggests some kind of toxin may have killed her. This doesn't exactly look like the xenomorph's work, does it? Not even the Teocellus creature, despite the blood from her eyes. From what we've seen later on, their methods leave a much more noticeable impression on the eye socket. So maybe it was D. plumacari, the killer alien plant, that killed her. Suffocation, toxin, that checks out. Or maybe it's one of the creatures that we still haven't seen yet. Whatever it may have been, Hermit has his suspicions that something very bad and very unusual took place leading up to this crash. They move on outside of the ship into a stairwell of the building. The only way across is to jump. While Siberian and Rashidi make it, Hermit is stopped when he notices the alien, which has been hunting the group the whole time. It leaps at him, causing him to fall down a floor, and pursues him through the halls until he's just narrowly able to make an escape into the elevator. It's a good moment, and the first time since the scene on the Maginot that we see the xenomorph in action. Previously, I've made comments about the suit and the animatronic head and how it isn't as convincing as I'd like. Some people agreed with me, some people thought I was being a little too hard on it. Either way, I'm not going to harp on it and repeat myself episode by episode, unless I guess there's something especially egregious in the future. But I've said my piece, it is what it is, and I can still overlook my personal criticisms and enjoy what is being offered here. What is offered is a really vicious, threatening alien that racks up a pretty alarming body count in this episode. Credit again has to go to Cameron Brown, the primary performer in this suit, a New Zealand actor who the cast fell in love with and affectionately referred to as our vegan xenomorph, as Brown himself is a vegan and extremely kind and soft-spoken. None of which you'd be able to gather from seeing this performance. Fans have already taken to nicknaming this alien Bear. Maybe because in one scene Wendy notes that the claw marks left behind by the alien look like they were left by a bear, or maybe due to its aggressive nature, or maybe even as a slight in-joke referencing another FX Hulu show, The Bear. But that works for me. And the thing is, since it's given so much screen time, the alien does begin to feel like it's genuinely another character of the show, not just a mindless monster. Something is going on in Bear's head. What exactly, I don't know. But you have to figure this thing is confused. It's out of its element. It's literally hundreds of millions of miles away from whatever its home is supposed to be. There's prey everywhere, there's threats everywhere, and if it's not at least a little bit panicked about that, it must be in sensory overload. This is not like the alien from the first film that has the small environment and the small group of prey to stalk. It's not like any of the aliens from the second film that has this controlled environment with a clear purpose and a leader such as the Queen calling the shots. If what was said of the alien in regards to the first film is true, then this creature has a very short lifespan. And if we know anything about the alien, it's that it puts its own survival aside for the survival of the species as a whole. That's why it makes sense to me why the alien finds itself where it does at the end of this episode, but I'll get to that later. I'll say that the series does have a good sense of how to balance all of the action and horror along with the quieter, more conversational scenes. Also opening this episode is an interesting and revealing moment between Dame Sylvia and Prodigy's wonderkind, Boy Cavalier. In knowing how each of these characters have already been established, I had been looking forward to a scene like this, and pretty glad we've already gotten it so early. The two exchange words about the hybrid program. We sense that conversations of this nature has taken place between the two in the past, but this is probably the first opportunity they've had to discuss things now that the project has become a success. The question is, where do we go from here? What are the expectations now that we've achieved the unachievable? Sylvia's interpretation has always seemed to be the same. This is the next step for humans. This is how we become truly immortal. The test subjects are precious, as they are life, and they must be nurtured and cared for, guided appropriately with, maybe she feels, a mother's touch. But we wonder if this is truly what she thinks is best for the hybrids, or is it because of her own misplaced desires for child-rearing that she's unable to achieve naturally with her husband? Cavalier's desires are a little more abstract. It's not about money, he says. People always think it's about money with trillionaires, or ego. But you know what I really want? I want to talk to somebody smarter than me. For once in my life, I want to climb to the top of the mountain and debate with someone who blows my mind. At the very least, my hope is that by giving Wendy a supercomputer for a brain and training by the best geniuses money can buy, I'll finally be able to have an interesting fucking conversation. I'm not entirely sure just how truthful Cavalier is in this revelation. I don't think he's being insincere or lying. I do think it's partly the truth, but probably not the full truth of what he actually wants to get out of these hybrids. This plain and simple is a character we can't fully trust, likely with some secrets and ulterior motives to be revealed later. But what could he be hiding, and what could ignite this desired mind-blowing debate with Wendy? If a cyborg is still too human, and a synthetic not human enough, could a hybrid offer a being that is just human enough to appreciate that it's synthetic? Is the tug-of-war between Kirsch's ideals and Dame Sylvia's ideals hammered into Wendy about which side she belongs to part of Cavalier's design? This episode's director, Dana Gonzalez, spoke with the official Alien Earth podcast, hosted by Adam Rogers, and brought up some interesting points when it comes to a later section of the episode. I think maybe the component of the hybrids Boy K didn't fully think through was the human part, and that humanity is going to challenge them because Wendy has a brother and wants to get back with him. That's the human part, that's not the machine part. Arthur, he's tracking her, and he's like, oh, she's communicating with the brother. And then that's how she learns how to control the system. And they're like, holy shit, she's more powerful than we even thought. Well, that power is driven by her emotion, which again, no one saw that coming. I don't think they thought like her emotion would mathematically collide with her AI powers and teach itself how to run the system because that's how emotionally she's going to get into Joe's life. So there's going to be this kind of collision of humanity and machine, and what wins, and we'll see more of that later. Maybe Boy K thought that through, maybe he didn't. But he does actually seem somewhat pleased with the results when he sees Wendy is able to control a faraway computer. She speaks in an in-joke related to the classic 20th Century Fox Animated Studios production Ice Age that has a special bond between the two. A cyborg would not have the ability to do this. A synthetic might, but would have no reason to. The very fact that she's a human works as motivation for this. What else could motivate a hybrid that a cyborg couldn't do and a synthetic wouldn't think to do? Boy Cavalier is eager to find out. We see Wendy and the Lost Boys still on their aircraft on the way to the crash site, and there is a conversation between Wendy and Slightly that's also revealing. Wendy tells Slightly about her brother and how she's motivated to find him and save him, also expressing guilt about leaving him. Slightly, in turn, shares his own secret. Back home in Mumbai, his father got very sick and died. In a holy ritual, he was burned on a pyre, but it eats away at Slightly. What if he wasn't dead? What if we burned him alive? You begin to wonder if all these Lost Boys have stories like this. Is it not just the physical illnesses that make them appealing as candidates? Maybe they all have some deep-rooted guilt or complexes or fears that might make them more ideal for Cavalier to control. Is it these types of emotions and memories that can help unlock the hybrid's potential further? What's noticeable about all these Lost Boys characters once they do get to the crash site is that they very clearly express fear. Fear can be a great motivator, and it is something very, very human. I know some viewers have taken up an issue with the fact that Cavalier is sending all these extremely expensive creations into a location where, 1, they may not be especially useful, and 2, would have a very good chance of being damaged, if not destroyed.
They're still in the prototype stage. The loss of a single unit would be devastating.
Yeah, so don't lose one.
In fairness, the actual show does bring this point up itself, which Boyke brushes off, so if it is true that it isn't about the money for him, then he would have other concerns. He may have been hoping for Wendy to come to him and suggest this idea. He, after all, employs Hermit, and maybe even made sure that his request to get out of his contract didn't go through in anticipation for an event such as this. What better circumstance to put these hybrids in to test the human elements of their nature and how they can serve the synthetic elements than something extremely high stress and terribly scary? Whether or not he specifically wants to exploit their fear, I don't know. But you can look at a character such as Kirsch, who is certainly not hindered by such a trait. This leads to a great line later on in the episode.
Fear is for animals. You are not animals. Now move.
Another unexpected trait to the hybrids, or at least to Wendy, at least at this moment, is that apparently they can pick up on the xenomorph's frequency. When they arrive at the crash site, Wendy says that she can hear a buzzing, and it apparently even seems enough to cause her some kind of pain or discomfort. She is able to harness her abilities further, though, and very quickly finds out that Hermit is on the 65th floor. She wastes no time making her way there, and Slightly is ordered to go with her. Kirsch and the other Lost Boys meanwhile investigate the Maginot. This is where they first encounter the D. Plumacari. Toodles seems especially interested in it. He stays back to observe it, and we get an idea of just how it may have attacked and killed Jabuzo. This sort of tentacle can come out, and it's a good bet that it can enter into a human's mouth and asphyxiate and or poison them that way. The gang also runs into the 2 poor bastards that Mara left behind to become victims of the ticks. And in what is the episode's most outrageous moment, they happen upon the ship's cat. The cat has been parasitized by the Teocellus, firmly implanted in its left eye socket. The parasite can control its host's movement and even its vocals. It lets out a disturbing little growl. Then it jumps out, I guess at the prospect of new hosts, and attempts to implant itself into Nibs. She's able to knock it away, so whether or not the Teocellus would be successful at implanting itself into a synthetic we don't really know yet, but they're all properly frightened by this thing. Rightly so. This is a gruesome moment, and I think delivers nicely on certain expectations I personally have about getting these kinds of shocking and gory moments from an Alien-related series. In fact, I'd even go as far to say that if you went into something like Alien Romulus, which was directed by Fede Alvarez, who made the notoriously gory Evil Dead remake, and were maybe a slight bit disappointed that it didn't go very hard on the gore, then this would be the solution to that. It doesn't hold back, and it's especially true in a following sequence where Hermit once again finds himself unfortunate enough to encounter the alien. He's at first relieved to run into another member of the search and rescue team, Burgerfield. They attempt to clear out these apartments in a bizarre moment where they seem to have interrupted this 18th century Versailles-themed party. Probably some kind of sick orgy. I immediately thought of that bizarre flashback from JFK where Tommy Lee Jones, Joe Pesci, and Kevin Bacon are all dressed up doing poppers and indulging in devious activities. I guess this is something the wealthy and shadowy figures of the world partake in. This has been pegged as Alien Earth's Eat the Rich scene. While not dwelling on it too much, the suggestion here is that in this giant building, it's the rich people who are high up and the poor people underground. But the sky is falling, and this rich bastard, his lordship, couldn't possibly care less. They practically beg him and his party guests to evacuate, but to no avail. That is when the alien reveals itself in a really nice shot where it blends into the abstract sculpture in the background and then completely lets loose on Burgerfield. It's brutal. We even see his face in the aftermath, and it's clear that Bear can do a lot of damage very quickly. This is true moments later when it's also very quickly able to wipe out everybody attending that party in the apartment with impossible speed. And yet, Hermit, who's already had an encounter with the alien, and will have a third before the episode is over, is able to survive. I suppose this is what you'd call plot armor. In the back of my head, I had a feeling we'd be seeing this kind of stuff going into the series, and was sort of preparing myself for it, so you have to suspend a little bit of disbelief. Also, on the Alien Earth podcast, Noah Hawley was interviewed and indirectly addresses this matter. An Alien movie is a 2-hour survival story at its heart, and it has a certain amount of setup, and then a lot of runaway, and then a certain amount of fighting back, and then the movie is over. That is not what a television show is. A television show is 10, 20, 50 hours of a continuous story about a group of characters who can't all die. In fact, most of them can't die. If you really want to tell stories about these people that an audience invests in, and so then the function of the monster becomes different in a television show than it is in a film. True enough, and I would think you would want some close calls and some nail-biting moments with characters that do ultimately make it out alive of a situation like this. It's fine and good to see the synthetics, or cyborgs, or hybrids go up against the alien, but when it comes to humans, it becomes a true threat where death and finality is a very real possibility. Maybe you can just throw your hands up and say, that's bullshit, that it's unrealistic, but I'll accept it to a point. And I do kind of think Hermit may eventually end up running out of luck. At the end of this episode, he's snatched up by the alien and taken away, with Wendy going after to save him. I've seen a few clips of him from the next episode, so I'm sure he'll be okay in this case, but I have a feeling something's going to happen to him. Eventually. I think he's going to get severely injured somehow in some way, and it's going to force Wendy to try to convince Cavalier to try the hybrid process on him. I could be wrong, but that's where I'm sensing this may be going. As far as the aftermath of the Eat the Rich scene goes, it's actually Morrow that saves him. He finally makes an appearance after being absent for a good deal of the episode. He's able to stun the alien, and Hermit, and sprays some kind of goo all over to secure it. Where he plans to bring it and how it can be secured, I don't know. But this is only a temporary solution, and Bear breaks free, killing more soldiers in the process, and it's on the loose yet again. Hermit eventually comes to, and this is where we discover the namesake of the episode. A resident of this apartment has a baseball signed by Reggie Jackson. This particular piece of memorabilia sparks some very strong memories within Hermit. He thinks back to times with his father, watching old broadcasts of the World Series. Would you look at that, Dad? Reggie Jackson, Game 6, 1977 World Series. New York Yankees versus Los Angeles Dodgers. Reggie Jackson hits 3 home runs. This ball and the game, we used to watch the old highlight reels together. He called it proof. He said sometimes the world gives you a moment to shine. And if you do, well, there's a name for that kind of hero. He called him Mr. October. This was a nice moment, and funnily enough, it actually reminded me a little bit of the earlier scenes from Prometheus. I know Noah Hawley wasn't intending to reference the Scott prequels, but it did actually feel similar to the scene with Shaw in her cryopod dreaming of her father as David watches over her. Maybe just a coincidence, and that's just how the show's style is, but it's at this moment, admiring the baseball and speaking alone to his dad, that Hermit is found by Wendy, along with Slightly. He quickly figures out that they are not human, and he is convinced to follow the two along to the front of the ship where Kirsch has ordered them to go to secure cargo. Now, I was a little surprised how they went about the dynamic here. I thought maybe they'd milk the aspect of Wendy's identity being a big secret just a little bit. Maybe for dramatic purposes, they'd hold on to it a little, have Wendy desperately wanting to tell him, but the time just isn't right, and it will have to wait, something like that. But no, literally in the very next scene, they get right to the revelation. In typical child fashion, Slightly spills the beans and lets Hermit know the truth. I actually appreciate how they got right to it and overthrew those expectations in favor of approaching the true drama of this revelation head-on and just about immediately. Hermit takes a little bit of convincing, but Wendy tells him things that only she would know, and he realizes he is face-to-face with his sister. He thought her to be dead, but here she is, standing before him, in a new and different form. I thought this was a very good scene, and it actually hit me pretty hard. As someone who's lost a sibling themselves, I always carry along with me this secret wish in my heart that maybe it was all a mistake. Maybe she's still alive, and here's literally that exact scenario playing out in front of me on this show. I wasn't expecting Alien Earth to affect me so deeply on that kind of emotional level, but here we are. Sidney Chandler and Alex Lothar really bring a lot to this scene and are truly convincing the emotions necessary to get all this across. It's a big show with a big plot, and in this moment, they're literally stopping in their tracks to get to this dramatic exchange, but it feels like it has come about very naturally. It doesn't feel rushed through, it feels just about right. Nothing too soap operatic about it, just the precise dramatic notes needed to conclude this episode. Well, maybe in another series this would be the very last scene, but this is Alien after all, and it takes it a step further with the horror elements. They reach the front of the ship, and they find this cargo, which happens to be the very familiar xenomorph eggs. The eggs are back. I really liked Alien Romulus, but you might remember they had this whole plot aspect of scientists being able to skip over the need for eggs and develop the facehuggers directly. And that's all fine and good for that movie, but you know what? I kind of missed the eggs. So it's nice to see them again returning in all their glory, with brand new idiots to stick their faces right into their openings. Also interesting is that we see the blue laser mist surrounding the congregation of these eggs. This, of course, is something we saw in the hold of the derelict ship from the original Alien. We also saw it in Alien Romulus, and at one point in the production, we were actually meant to see it in Alien 3. A shame we never did, because earlier scripts for Alien 3 had the best and most concise explanation for this phenomenon. In this draft, the characters Dylan and Morse find Superintendent Andrews cocooned in the assembly hall of the prison on Fury 161, as per the script. In the fine mist of the chamber, a narrow membrane, like a cross-section of laser light, encircles the cocoon chamber. Dylan. It's like an alarm. Step in there and it knows we're here. And that is exactly how it functions here. They set off this alarm, and we can see the point of view of the alien as it rushes madly to their location. It appears, naturally, snatching up the only human, and Hermit is taken somewhere below. Wendy leaves to rescue him, leaving slightly alone with the eggs. Guard the omelet, she tells him. Stinkfist by Tool rocks on the soundtrack, and that's where we're left with as the end of this episode. A decent cliffhanger. A final note on this episode, we finally get to see Miss Yutani, after only catching a small glimpse of her and a mention of her in episode 1. She and Cavalier get on a phone call, and we get a sense of how this corporately run world operates. It's about as litigious as you can imagine. The issue is that the ship belongs to Weyland Yutani, but it has crashed on Prodigy property within Prodigy jurisdiction. Who has ownership at this point? Yutani insists she be allowed to send a private team of her own to retrieve the contents of the Maginot, and Cavalier declines. He reminds her that such an act would be considered hostile, with some grave implications to that, and she should just let the lawyers figure things out from this point forward. He knows what's on the ship is extremely valuable, and now that it has landed in his lap, either by happenstance or a nefarious plot of his own, he's not going to let it all go so easily. We'll be seeing how this works out for him as the series continues, and I think at this point we're very quickly moving into unpredictable territory. From what I've noticed, a lot of what we've seen from the trailers and behind-the-scenes featurettes are from these first 2 episodes. When you keep a close eye on this kind of stuff, you can't help but think to yourself in the back of your head while watching, I've seen this in the trailer or that in the trailer, but I think we're starting to run low on that now. With 2 episodes aired, and still 6 to go, there's a lot of different ways this all could go forward. And you know what, that's part of the fun for me now, in never having been able to watch an Alien show and experience it in that kind of way. I get to tune in and watch and look forward to the next week, and be left wondering what may happen next. That's a new sort of feeling for Alien, and an Alien story, and I'm kind of loving it. Apparently the next episode, airing very soon, we're going to see Kirsch and Morrow have a little standoff. That should be great. And at some point, some crazy shit is going to go down with that goat, which could possibly put what we've seen with the cat to shame. I wonder what's going to happen there. In the meantime, I'll keep tuning in. I'm enjoying the series so far. I'm curious to see what's next, and it won't be too long until I'm back here again going over the next episode, Metamorphosis. I'll see you then. But I'd love to know, what did you think of this second episode? How does it compare against the first, and do you have a favorite of the 2 so far? Comment below and share your thoughts. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching today. Please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with all the latest videos. My very special thanks today goes out to Nicholas Butta, our Weyland Yutani executive, and Gregory Ford, the Patreon Hive Praetorian. A very special thanks to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley Tier of Excellence. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for further information. You can also follow me on social media. Follow at alien_theory on X, formerly Twitter. Follow at alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.